Marcus Tank Rodriguez had been stationed at Naval Base Coronado for 8 years, and in that time he had seen countless recruits come and go. Most of them arrived with wide eyes and big dreams, only to wash out during the grueling SEAL training program. Tank had little patience for dreamers who couldn't back up their ambitions with raw determination and physical prowess. The morning sun beat down mercilessly on the training compound as Tank supervised a group of new arrivals. They were going through basic orientation exercises, nothing too demanding yet, but enough to separate the wheat from the chaff. Tank's massive frame cast a long shadow across the sandy ground as he moved between the recruits, his weathered face showing years of combat experience and rigorous training. "Move it, move it, move it!" Tank barked at a struggling recruit who was falling behind during morning calisthenics. "My grandmother could do push-ups faster than that, and she's been dead for 10 years. The other instructors chuckled at Tank's signature brand of motivation. He was known throughout the base for his colorful commentary and his ability to push recruits to their absolute limits. Some called him harsh, but Tank knew that the battlefield didn't offer second chances or participation trophies. As the morning progressed, Tank noticed a new face among the group. A woman, probably in her mid-20s, with short brown hair and an athletic build. She moved through the exercises with fluid precision, her form nearly perfect in every drill. Unlike the other recruits who were already showing signs of fatigue, she seemed to be warming up. "Great! Another college athlete who thinks she knows what real training looks like," Tank muttered to himself. He had seen this type before: former track stars, soccer players, swimmers who came in thinking their previous athletic experience would give them an edge. They usually learned quickly that SEAL training was an entirely different beast. The woman completed her set of burpees and moved on to the rope climbing station. Tank watched as she scaled the 30-foot rope with remarkable speed and technique. Her grip was solid, her breathing controlled, and she descended with the same fluid motion she had used to climb up. It was impressive, Tank had to admit, but he had seen impressive before. The real test wasn't physical prowess in controlled conditions. It was mental toughness when everything went wrong. "Not bad for a warm-up," the woman said to another recruit as she landed softly on the sand. Tank raised an eyebrow. Warm up? Most recruits were already breathing hard after the rope climb, but this one was barely winded. Tank decided it was time to introduce himself in his usual fashion. He approached the group with a bucket of ice-cold water, a tactic he often used to test new recruits' reactions to unexpected situations. The ability to stay calm and focused when surprised was crucial for special operations. "All right, listen up, rookies," Tank announced, his voice carrying across the training area. "Time to learn lesson number 1. Expect the unexpected." Without warning, Tank hefted the bucket and launched its contents at the nearest recruit. The icy water hit the woman square in the chest, soaking her PT gear and causing her to stumble backwards slightly. The other recruits gasped and stepped back, unsure whether to laugh or offer help. Tank expected to see shock, anger, or at least some kind of emotional reaction. Instead, the woman simply wiped water from her face, squared her shoulders, and looked directly at him. Her expression was calm, almost amused. "Is that supposed to be cold?" she asked, wringing out her shirt. "Because I've done winter warfare training in Alaska, where the air temperature was minus 40 degrees. This feels like a warm bath in comparison." Tank's jaw tightened. He wasn't used to recruits talking back, especially not with such confidence. Most new arrivals were too intimidated to do anything but stammer apologies and try to blend into the background. "Oh, we got ourselves a comedian," Tank said, stepping closer. His 6'4" frame towered over the woman, but she didn't back down. "Let me guess, you were some kind of hotshot in college, right? Maybe played a little soccer. Thought you were tough." The woman's eyes never left Tank's face. "Something like that," she replied evenly. "Well, sweetheart, let me tell you something," Tank continued, his voice dropping to a menacing whisper. "This isn't your high school gymnasium. This is SEAL country, and around here we don't have time for prima donnas who think they can waltz in and show off. You might have been the star of your little team back home, but here, you're nobody until you prove otherwise. Several other instructors had stopped their own training sessions to watch the confrontation. It wasn't unusual for Tank to single out recruits who seemed overconfident, but there was something different about this exchange. The woman wasn't backing down, and Tank seemed to be getting more frustrated by her calm demeanor. "You think you're ready for what we do here?" Tank asked, gesturing around the training compound. "You think a few morning exercises and a rope climb make you SEAL material? I've seen thousands of recruits come through these gates, and I can spot the ones who won't make a mile away." The woman tilted her head slightly, as if considering his words. "And what do you see when you look at me?" she asked. Tank laughed, but there was no humor in it. "I see another college kid who watched too many action movies and thought she could play soldier for a few weeks before reality sets in. I give you maybe 3 days before you're crying for mommy and begging to go home." The other recruits watched in stunned silence. They had all heard stories about the brutal hazing and psychological pressure that came with SEAL training, but seeing it firsthand was different. Some looked sympathetic toward the woman, while others seemed relieved that they weren't the target of Tank's attention. 3 days, Tank repeated, pointing a thick finger at the woman. "That's my professional assessment. And when you do wash out, don't come looking for sympathy. Nobody forced you to come here, and nobody's going to hold your hand when you realize you bit off more than you can chew." The woman nodded slowly, as if accepting his prediction. "I appreciate the assessment," she said. "Though I have to say, your technique could use some work." The water was a nice touch, very dramatic, but the psychological component needs refinement. If you really want to break someone's spirit, you need to attack their core identity, not just their confidence. Tank's face reddened. "Excuse me. I'm just saying, if this is your standard intimidation protocol, you might want to consider some adjustments. It's effective against certain personality types, but it won't work on everyone. Some people respond better to different approaches." The training yard had gone completely silent. Even the instructors were staring in disbelief. Nobody gave Tank Rodriguez feedback on his training methods. He had been perfecting his techniques for over a decade, and his success rate spoke for itself. "Listen here, recruit," Tank growled, stepping even closer. "I don't need some fresh-faced college graduate telling me how to do my job. I've been breaking down and rebuilding warriors since before you could spell Navy. You want to critique my methods? Fine. Let's see how well you do when those methods are focused entirely on you." The woman maintained her calm expression. "Looking forward to it," she said simply. Tank studied her face, searching for any sign of fear or uncertainty. He found none. If anything, she seemed genuinely interested in what he had planned. It was unsettling. Most recruits who challenged him early on were either incredibly brave or incredibly stupid. Tom would tell which category this one fell into. "What's your name, Hotshot?" Tank asked. "Sarah," she replied. "Sarah Mitchell." "Well, Sarah Mitchell, welcome to my world. I hope you're ready for the ride of your life, because starting tomorrow, you're going to get my full attention. Every exercise, every drill, every moment of training is going to be a test designed specifically for you. By the time I'm done, you'll either be the toughest SEAL candidate this program has ever seen, or you'll be on a bus back to whatever suburb you came from." Sarah smiled for the first time since the conversation began. It wasn't a nervous smile or a forced attempt at bravado. It was the smile of someone who had just been offered exactly what they wanted. "Sound perfect," she said. "I wouldn't want it any other way." Tank turned away, dismissing her with a wave of his hand. "We'll see about that." Everyone back to training. Fun time's over. As the recruits scattered to their assigned stations, Tank couldn't shake the feeling that something was off about Sarah Mitchell. Her confidence wasn't the usual false bravado he saw in overcompensating recruits. It was something deeper, more genuine. She carried herself like someone who had nothing to prove and nothing to lose. The rest of the morning passed without incident, but Tank found himself watching Sarah more closely than usual. She excelled at every exercise, offering quiet encouragement to struggling teammates and never showing off or drawing unnecessary attention to herself. When other recruits stumbled or fell behind, She would often position herself nearby, ready to offer a steadying hand or a word of motivation. During the lunch break, Tank overheard some of the recruits talking about Sarah. They were impressed by her performance and her attitude, but they were also concerned about how Tank was likely to make her life difficult in the coming weeks. "She seems cool," one recruit said, "but Tank's got it in for her now. She shouldn't have talked back like that." "I don't know," another replied. "Did you see how she handled that water thing? Most people would have freaked out or gotten angry. She just took it and moved on. That's not normal rookie behavior." Tank had to agree with that assessment. Sarah's reaction had been unusual, almost professional. It reminded him of how experienced operators responded to unexpected situations, with calm analysis rather than emotional reaction. As the afternoon training session began, Tank decided to test Sarah's limits more systematically. He assigned her to the most challenging rotation stations and paired her with the strongest male recruits for partner exercises. Each time, she performed at or above the expected level, never complaining about the obvious attempts to overwhelm her. During weapons familiarization, Sarah demonstrated knowledge that went far beyond basic military training. She handled each firearm with practiced efficiency, her stance and grip indicating significant experience. When Tank asked about her background, she mentioned some hunting experience with her father, but something in her tone suggested there was more to the story. The day's final exercise was a team-based obstacle course designed to test communication, leadership, and problem-solving under pressure. Tank assigned Sarah to a team of recruits who had been struggling throughout the day, essentially setting them up for failure. The other teams were stacked with stronger performers. As the exercise began, Tank watched Sarah take charge of her team without being pushy or domineering. She assessed each team member's strengths and weaknesses quickly, then organized their approach to maximize their collective effectiveness. Under her guidance, the struggling team began to work together more efficiently than they had all day. By the end of the course, Sarah's team had not only completed the exercise successfully, but had done so faster than two of the stronger teams. Tank had to admit he was impressed, though he wasn't about to let it show. As the recruits gathered for final formation, Tank noticed Sarah cleaning sand out of her equipment with the same methodical attention to detail he expected from seasoned professionals. Every piece of gear was inspected, cleaned, and properly stowed. It was another small indication that there was more to Sarah Mitchell than met the eye. "Attention!" Tank called out, and the recruits snapped to formation. Today was your introduction to SEAL training. For some of you, it was probably the hardest physical challenge you've ever faced. For others, it was just the beginning of a very long journey. Tomorrow, we start separating the real candidates from the tourists. His eyes found Sarah in the formation. She stood at perfect attention, her uniform still damp from the morning's water incident, but otherwise immaculate. Her expression was focused and ready, showing no signs of fatigue despite the demanding day. "Some of you think you know what you're getting into," Tank continued. "You think you've done your research, watched some documentaries, maybe talked to a few veterans. Let me be clear, you know nothing. Real SEAL training will test every assumption you have about your own capabilities and limitations." As he dismissed the formation, Tank found himself looking forward to tomorrow's training with unusual anticipation. Most recruit classes followed predictable patterns, with clear leaders and obvious weak links emerging within the first few days. But Sarah Mitchell was an unknown variable, and Tank had learned to be wary of unknowns in his line of work. That evening, as Tank finished his paperwork and prepared to leave the base, he received a call from his commanding officer, Lieutenant Commander Harris. It wasn't unusual for Harris to check in on new recruit classes, but something in his tone suggested this wasn't a routine inquiry. "How did the new group look today?" Harris asked. "Standard mix," Tank replied. "Few strong candidates. Several who probably won't make it past the first week. Nothing too unusual." There was a pause. "What about Mitchell?" Tank frowned. It was odd for a commanding officer to ask about specific recruits by name, especially on their first day. "She's interesting, confident, maybe overconfident. Good physical performance, but I'm still evaluating her psychological readiness. I see. Keep me posted on her progress. The line went dead, leaving Tank with more questions than answers. Why was Harris specifically interested in Sarah Mitchell? How did he even know her name? New recruits didn't usually come to the attention of senior officers until much later in the training cycle. Tank made a mental note to do some research on Sarah Mitchell's background. Something was definitely not adding up, and he had learned over the years that surprises in SEAL training were rarely pleasant ones. If there was something unusual about this recruit, he needed to know what it was before it became a problem. As he drove home through the San Diego evening traffic, Tank couldn't shake the image of Sarah's calm, confident smile when he had threatened her with his special attention. It was the smile of someone who knew something he didn't, and that made him very uncomfortable indeed. The second week of training arrived with Tank's promise to give Sarah Mitchell his full attention. He had spent the weekend researching her background, but found surprisingly little information. Her military record showed basic enlisted service with exemplary performance ratings, but the details were sparse. Most recruits came with extensive documentation of their previous military experience, but Sarah's file seemed deliberately minimal. Tank decided to take a more direct approach. If Sarah Mitchell thought she could handle his special brand of motivation, he would show her what real pressure looked like. He had broken down Marines, Rangers, and even a few Special Forces candidates who thought they were tough enough for SEAL training. One college athlete with an attitude problem wouldn't be any different. The morning began with PT at 0500 hours. While the other recruits performed standard calisthenics, Tank assigned Sarah to a solo workout routine that would have challenged experienced operators. 200 push-ups, 300 sit-ups, a 5-mile run in full gear, followed by rope climbs until muscle failure. Think you can handle a real workout, Mitchell? Tank asked as he outlined her assignments. Or, do you want to join the regular recruit program, like everyone else? Sarah listened to the extensive list without expression. Sounds good, she said. Should I start with the run or the calisthenics? Tank had expected her to object or at least show some concern about the workload. Instead, she seemed to be treating it like a normal training request. Start with everything, he growled. And Mitchell, there's no time limit, but there is a minimum standard. Anything less than perfect form doesn't count. As Sarah began her workout, Tank supervised the other recruits while keeping one eye on her progress. She attacked each exercise with methodical intensity, her form remaining crisp even as the repetitions mounted. Other recruits began to take notice, some offering encouragement, others simply staring in amazement. By the time Sarah finished the calisthenics portion and moved on to her run, word had spread throughout the training compound. Instructors from other platoons found reasons to walk by and observe the recruit who was apparently doing a one-woman fitness marathon. Tank followed Sarah's progress on the running course using a golf cart. She maintained a steady pace that was fast enough to be challenging, but sustainable enough to complete the full distance. Her breathing remained controlled, and her stride showed no signs of deterioration. It was becoming clear that Tank had underestimated her physical conditioning. How you feeling, Mitchell? Tank called out as she passed the 3-mile mark. Great, Sarah replied without breaking stride. This is actually a nice change of pace from yesterday. More focused. Tank's jaw clenched. She was supposed to be struggling by now, showing signs of fatigue or frustration. Instead, she seemed to be enjoying herself. He made a mental note to increase the difficulty level for tomorrow's session. When Sarah completed her run and moved on to rope climbing, a small crowd of off-duty personnel had gathered to watch. It wasn't every day that a new recruit tackled an advanced training regimen solo, and Sarah's performance was drawing attention from across the base. Tank called out repetition counts as Sarah climbed. 21, 22, 23. Each climb took her up 30 feet of rope and back down with perfect technique. Her grip remained strong, and her breathing stayed controlled. It was an impressive display of both physical and mental endurance. At 35 repetitions, Tank expected Sarah to signal that she was done. Most experienced SEALs will be reaching their limit by that point. Instead, Sarah continued climbing. 40, 45, 50. "That's enough, Mitchell," Tank finally called out. He was starting to worry that she would injure herself, and explaining a training injury on day 2 would be problematic. Sarah completed her 50th climb and dropped to the ground. She was breathing hard for the first time all morning, but she wasn't doubled over or showing signs of distress. She grabbed a towel and wiped sweat from her face, then looked at Tank expectantly. "What's next?" she asked. Tank stared at her in disbelief. "What's next is you join the other recruits for weapons training. You've done enough solo work for one morning." During weapons familiarization, Sarah's performance was again noteworthy. She handled each firearm with the kind of casual competence that typically took months to develop. Her shooting groups were tight, her weapon transitions smooth, and her safety protocol flawless. When Tank introduced malfunction drills, she cleared jams and executed immediate actions faster than recruits who had been training for weeks. "Where did you learn to shoot like that?" Tank asked during a brief break. "My father taught me when I was young," Sarah replied, checking her weapon. He was pretty serious about proper technique. Tank made another mental note. Sarah's father was apparently more than a casual hunter if he had taught her to shoot at this level. The way she handled firearms suggested formal training, possibly military or law enforcement background. During the lunch break, Tank overheard several recruits discussing Sarah's morning performance. The general consensus was that she was either superhuman or had been seriously understating her background. A few recruits were beginning to wonder if she might be some kind of test plant, someone sent to evaluate the training program. Tank dismissed that theory immediately. He had been involved in enough program evaluations to know how they worked, and they never involved sending undercover personnel through actual training. Still, something about Sarah Mitchell wasn't adding up. The afternoon session focused on small unit tactics and communication. Tank paired Sarah with the weakest performers in the class, hoping to frustrate her with teammates who couldn't keep up. Instead, Sarah adapted her leadership style to bring out the best in her struggling partners. During one exercise, Tank watched Sarah work with a recruit named Peterson who had been having difficulty with basic tactical concepts. Rather than showing impatience or taking over completely, Sarah broke down the problem into smaller components and guided Peterson through each step. "Think of it like a puzzle," Sarah explained patiently. "Each piece of information you gather helps you see the bigger picture. Your job isn't to know everything at once. It's to collect the pieces and put them together systematically." Peterson nodded, clearly understanding the concept for the first time. Under Sarah's guidance, he began to execute the tactical exercises with much greater confidence. Tank had to admit that her teaching ability was impressive, showing a level of maturity and experience that was unusual in new recruits. By the end of the second week, Tank was running out of ways to challenge Sarah individually. Every task he assigned, she completed successfully. Every obstacle he created, she overcame with apparent ease. Her performance was beginning to draw attention from higher levels of command, and Tank was feeling pressure to explain how one recruit could be so far ahead of her peers. The breakthrough came during a particularly demanding training evolution involving underwater navigation. The exercise required recruits to swim underwater distances while carrying equipment, simulating combat scenarios where SEALs might need to approach targets from the water without detection. Most recruits struggled with the combination of breath control, navigation, and equipment management. It was a complex skill that typically took weeks to master. Tank expected Sarah to encounter her first real obstacle during this phase of training. Instead, Sarah approached the underwater navigation exercise with the same calm competence she had shown throughout her training. She studied the course layout, checked her equipment methodically, and entered the water with confidence. Her first run through the course was nearly flawless, completing the navigation points with accuracy and efficiency that surprised even the specialized dive instructors. "Has she done this before?" one of the dive instructors asked Tank. "Not according to her file," Tank replied, but his tone suggested he was beginning to doubt the accuracy of that file. After the underwater exercise, Tank decided it was time for a direct conversation. He pulled Sarah aside while the other recruits were cleaning their equipment. Mitchell, I'm going to ask you a direct question, and I want a direct answer, Tank said. Have you done SEAL training before? Sarah looked at him steadily. No, I haven't done SEAL training before. Have you done similar training with other special operations units? I've done various types of military training, Sarah replied carefully. Tank stepped closer. That's not what I asked. I asked specifically about special operations training. Your performance over the past 2 weeks suggests a level of experience that doesn't match your official record. Sarah was quiet for a moment, apparently considering her response. I understand your confusion, she said finally. My background is somewhat different from most recruits, but I'm here to go through the same training as everyone else under the same conditions. That's not good enough, Tank said. I need to know what I'm dealing with. If you're some kind of special case or test subject, I need to know that now. It affects how I manage the training program and how I evaluate the other recruits. Sarah nodded. I appreciate your position. All I can tell you is that I'm here legitimately. I'm going through the program the same as any other recruit, and my previous experience shouldn't affect how you treat me or the other candidates. Tank studied her face, looking for signs of deception or evasion. What he saw was sincerity, but also a kind of professional distance that reminded him of briefings with intelligence officers who couldn't reveal classified information. Is there something about your background that's classified? Tank asked. There are aspects of my previous service that I'm not authorized to discuss, Sarah admitted. But nothing that affects my status as a SEAL candidate or my eligibility for this program. Tank felt a chill run down his spine. In his experience, the only people who couldn't discuss their previous military service were those involved in special access programs or classified operations. Such individuals typically didn't end up in SEAL training unless there were very specific reasons. What's your current rank? Tank asked, realizing he had never seen this information clearly stated in her file. Sarah hesitated for just a moment. That's complicated. Complicated how? Before Sarah could answer, Tank's radio crackled with a message from the base communications center. Instructor Rodriguez, please report to the CO's office immediately. Tank looked at Sarah suspiciously. This conversation isn't over, Mitchell. As Tank walked toward the administrative building, his mind raced through the possibilities. Sarah Mitchell was clearly not a typical recruit, but the nature of her background remained mysterious. Her performance suggested extensive training, possibly at levels that exceeded standard SEAL preparation. Her reluctance to discuss her rank and previous service indicated involvement in classified programs. Tank's radio crackled again as he approached the CO's office. Instructor Rodriguez, you're requested to bring recruit Mitchell with you. Tank stopped walking. In 8 years of SEAL training, he had never been asked to bring a specific recruit to a command meeting. Whatever was happening with Sarah Mitchell, it was about to be revealed, and Tank suspected it was going to change everything he thought he knew about his current training class. He turned around and walked back toward the training area, where Sarah was helping other recruits clean and stow their equipment. As he approached, she looked up with an expression that suggested she had been expecting this moment. Mitchell, Tank called out. You're coming with me. Bring your gear. Sarah nodded and gathered her equipment without question. As they walked toward the administrative building, Tank tried to read her body language for clues about what was coming. She seemed calm, but alert, like someone approaching a situation that required careful attention, but not fear. Any idea what this is about? Tank asked as they climbed the steps to the CO's office. Sarah glanced at him. I think it's time for some introductions. Tank knocked on the door of Lieutenant Commander Harris's office, still trying to piece together the puzzle of Sarah Mitchell. The past 2 weeks have been a constant source of frustration and confusion as every attempt to challenge the mysterious recruit had failed to produce the expected results. Enter, came Harris's voice from inside. Tank opened the door and stepped into the office, followed by Sarah. What he saw inside made him stop short. Seated around Harris's desk were several officers he didn't recognize, including a Navy captain whose uniform displayed ribbons and insignia that suggested extensive special operations experience. But Most surprising was the presence of Admiral Patricia Hendricks, the commanding officer of Naval Special Warfare Command. Instructor Rodriguez, Recruit Mitchell, please take a seat, Harris said, gesturing to two chairs that had been arranged facing the group of officers. Tank sat down rigidly, his mind racing. Admiral Hendricks didn't make casual visits to training facilities. Her presence indicated that whatever was happening involved the highest levels of Naval Special Operations Command. Sarah, meanwhile, sat with the same calm composure she had maintained throughout her training. Instructor Rodriguez, Admiral Hendricks began, I understand you've had some questions about Recruit Mitchell's background and performance over the past 2 weeks. Tank nodded carefully. Yes, ma'am. Her capabilities seem to exceed what would be expected from someone with her listed experience level. Admiral Hendricks smiled slightly. I imagine they would. Instructor Rodriguez, I'd like you to meet Captain Sarah Mitchell, United States Navy SEALs. The room went completely silent. Tank felt as if the floor had dropped out from under him. He stared at Sarah, whose expression hadn't changed, and then back at Admiral Hendricks. I'm sorry, ma'am. Did you say Captain? Tank managed to ask. That's correct. Captain Mitchell has been assigned as the new commanding officer of SEAL Team 7, effective immediately. She's been observing the training program as part of her transition to her new command. Tank's world tilted. Sarah Mitchell wasn't a recruit at all. She was a Navy captain, which meant she outranked not only Tank, but every other officer on the base except for Admiral Hendricks herself. And she was being assigned to command one of the most elite SEAL teams in the Navy. I don't understand, Tank said weakly. Why was she going through recruit training? Captain Mitchell spoke for the first time since entering the office. Admiral Hendricks wanted someone to evaluate the current training program from a recruit's perspective. Since I was transitioning between assignments, I volunteered to go through the basic program to observe training methods, instructor techniques, and recruit development protocols. Tank's face went pale as he realized the full implications of what had happened. For 2 weeks, he had been treating a Navy captain like a problematic recruit. He had thrown water on her, insulted her abilities, questioned her background, and subjected her to punishment exercises designed to break down overconfident candidates. Sir, ma'am, Tank stammered, looking between Admiral Hendricks and Captain Mitchell. Relax, Instructor Rodriguez, Admiral Hendricks said. You're not in trouble. In fact, Captain Mitchell's report on the training program has been quite positive. She's particularly impressed with your ability to identify and develop leadership potential among the recruits. Tank looked at Sarah, Captain Mitchell, with new understanding. The way you handled the other recruits, your teaching style with Peterson, your performance on all the exercises, you weren't showing off. You were evaluating. Captain Mitchell nodded. I was observing how recruits respond to different types of pressure, how they support each other, and how effectively the training program develops the skills and mindset necessary for special operations. Your methods are sound, Rodriguez. Unconventional sometimes, but effective. The water incident on the first day, Tank said, realization dawning. You weren't just taking it in stride. You were analyzing my technique. Actually, that was genuinely surprising, Captain Mitchell admitted with a slight smile. Though your read of my reaction was accurate, I was evaluating the exercise as a psychological assessment tool. It's quite effective for identifying recruits who might have trouble with unexpected situations in the field. Admiral Hendricks leaned forward. Captain Mitchell's assignment to SEAL Team 7 represents a significant milestone for Naval Special Operations. She'll be the first woman to command a SEAL team, and her selection was based on an exceptional record of performance in some of the Navy's most challenging assignments. Tank was beginning to understand why Captain Mitchell's background had been so difficult to research. The classified previous service you mentioned. I've spent the last 6 years in various special operations assignments that required security clearances well above your level, Captain Mitchell explained. I couldn't discuss those experiences without compromising ongoing operations and intelligence sources. The unnamed captain spoke up for the first time. Rodriguez, I want you to understand something. Captain Mitchell didn't just volunteer for this evaluation assignment. She specifically requested it. She wanted to experience your training program because she'd heard about your reputation for developing exceptional operators. Tank looked at Captain Mitchell with new respect. You came here to learn from the program? I came here to learn and to contribute, Captain Mitchell replied. SEAL Team 7 will be receiving some of the graduates from this training program. I wanted to understand their development process and identify ways to make the transition from training to operational status more effective. Admiral Hendricks stood up, indicating the meeting was drawing to a close. Instructor Rodriguez, I want you to know that Captain Mitchell's evaluation of your training methods will be instrumental in updating our program protocols. Your ability to challenge recruits while maintaining their confidence and team cohesion is exactly what we need in our instructors. Tank stood as well, still processing everything he had learned. Admiral, I have to ask, the way I treated Captain Mitchell over the past 2 weeks, was that appropriate? Captain Mitchell answered before Admiral Hendricks could respond. Rodriguez, you treated me exactly the way you should have treated any recruit who showed confidence without proving competence. The fact that I wasn't actually a recruit doesn't change the fact that your methods were appropriate for the situation as you understood it. Besides, she added with a grin, it was educational. I haven't had anyone throw water on me since survival training 12 years ago. It was a good reminder that assumptions can be dangerous, even for experienced operators. Tank realized he had been holding his breath and let it out slowly. So what happens now? Now, Captain Mitchell takes command of SEAL Team 7, and you continue training the next generation of SEALs, Admiral Hendricks replied. Though I suspect there may be some coordination between your program and Captain Mitchell's team in the future. Captain Mitchell extended her hand to Tank. Rodriguez, I want to thank you for 2 weeks of excellent training. I learned a great deal about current instruction methods, and I was genuinely impressed with your ability to bring out the best in challenging recruits. Tank shook her hand, still somewhat stunned. Captain, I have to ask, when I gave you that speech about giving you my full attention and making your life difficult, Captain Mitchell laughed. I was looking forward to it. I hadn't had a really challenging workout routine in months. You did me a favor. As the group of officers prepared to leave, Admiral Hendricks turned back to Tank. Instructor Rodriguez, one more thing. Captain Mitchell has recommended that we implement some of the team-building techniques she observed during her time with your recruits. You may be asked to help develop training protocols for other special operations programs. Tank nodded, still trying to process the morning's revelations. Yes, ma'am. Whatever's needed. After the officers departed, Tank walked back toward the training compound in a daze. The recruit he had been trying to break down and rebuild for 2 weeks was actually a Navy captain who outranked him by several levels. The woman he had subjected to punishment exercises and psychological pressure was about to take command of one of the Navy's most elite units. As he approached the training area, Tank saw the other recruits gathered around their equipment, clearly wondering where Mitchell had gone and whether she was in trouble. Tank realized he couldn't explain the full situation due to security protocols, but he needed to address their concerns. Listen up, Tank called out, gathering the recruits around him. Mitchell has been reassigned to a different program. Her time with this training class has ended. Several recruits looked disappointed. Peterson, the recruit Sarah had helped with tactical exercises, seemed particularly concerned. Is she okay? Did something happen? Tank chose his words carefully. Mitchell is fine. She's been selected for a specialized assignment that required her to leave the program early. That kind of thing happens sometimes in the military. The important thing is that you focus on your own training and development. Will we see her again? Another recruit asked. Tank thought about Captain Mitchell's new assignment and the likelihood that some of these recruits would eventually serve under her command. You might, he said. The military is smaller than you think. People's paths cross in unexpected ways. As the recruits returned to their training exercises, Tank reflected on the lessons of the past 2 weeks. He had learned that assumptions could be dangerous, that exceptional performance might have explanations beyond natural talent, and that sometimes the people who seemed most confident actually were the most competent. He also realized that his training methods had been validated at the highest levels of naval command. The techniques he had developed through years of experience were being recognized as effective tools for developing special operations personnel. Most importantly, Tank had learned to look beyond surface appearances when evaluating people. Sarah Mitchell had appeared to be an overconfident college athlete trying to prove herself in a male-dominated field. In reality, she was one of the most experienced and capable officers in the Navy, someone whose expertise far exceeded his own in many areas. That evening, as Tank completed his daily reports, he found himself wondering how many other assumptions he had made about people throughout his career. How many recruits had he underestimated? How many had he overestimated? The experience with Captain Mitchell had reminded him that human beings were complex and that their true capabilities often lay hidden beneath surface appearances. Tank also found himself looking forward to the possibility of working with Captain Mitchell again in the future. Her insights into training methodology had been valuable, and her ability to connect with struggling recruits had impressed him. If she was taking command of SEAL Team 7, she would need well-trained operators, and Tank was determined to ensure that his training program produced the best possible candidates. A week later, Tank received a brief email from Captain Mitchell. It simply said, "Thank you for the training. The ice-water technique is now part of my team's preparation protocol. Looking forward to working with your graduates." Mitchell. Tank smiled as he read the message. Somewhere in the Navy's Special Operations community, Captain Sarah Mitchell was probably throwing ice water on experienced SEALs and telling them to expect the unexpected. And those SEALs, like Tank himself, were probably learning that their assumptions about their new commanding officer might need some serious revision. Tank printed the email and pinned it to his bulletin board, a reminder that in the world of special operations, nothing was ever quite what it seemed, and the most important lessons often came from the most unexpected sources. From that day forward, whenever Tank felt tempted to make quick judgments about new recruits, he remembered Captain Sarah Mitchell and the 2 weeks when he thought he was training an overconfident college athlete who turned out to be one of the Navy's most accomplished special operations officers. The story became a legend around the base, though most people never learned the full truth. They just knew that Instructor Rodriguez had once thrown water on a recruit who took it with unusual grace, and that somehow that incident had led to improvements in the training program that benefited everyone. For Tank, it remained a powerful reminder that in the military, as in life, respect should be earned through performance, not assumed through appearance, and that the most valuable lessons often came from the people who surprised you the most.